You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs Daily Podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. And whether you're a U of H fan or just hey, Kansas, I appreciate you making us your first listen of the day. Appreciate you making us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. And we're enjoying the conversation. But don't say, tell us in the comments down below if you like your ice cubed or crushed. So Martin, fellow film watcher of random college kids from all over the country with me these days, do you like your ice crushed or cubed?
Crushed.
Today's show is brought to you, of course, by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and more on that fun later. But Mar and I got a lot of stuff to talk about. I know there are plenty of other people that make content that are watching film on random college kids. I thought I was watching a lot of film on college kids that don't go to the University of Houston to try and get a gauge on what Houston's going to look like next year because they're in the transfer portal. And I think Martin probably doubled what I'm doing these days as far as how much film he's got going on. And so I want to talk with Martin some about like where he's at on some of these guys and kind of like compare notes almost. I want to talk some about the skill guys, the skinny guys. Houston got another one of those. He's not so skinny on Monday. I have some worries about something on the defense, but first, Martin, you wrote a long piece out about most of the offensive line transfers. We talked last week about Connor Wegman, obviously transferred from A&M, kind of sparked a lot of this. And now it looks like they've got a lot of guys to block for him. And so I think I made my case fairly well known on Monday's episode, but who's your most impressive offensive lineman you saw transfer in?
I think McKenzie Agnello from Mexico. He had, I guess, the most impressive tape. Not that the other guys were bad, but he just stood out the most. If I remember correctly, he's like 6'4", 310, playing center. That's good size for that position. Very athletic. He's really quick at the snap. New Mexico actually did some interesting things with him. He played like nearly 300 snaps at right tackle, and then at the goal line in those situations they play him as like a second tight end.
Yeah, they put him like at a point of attack is what I called it. Yeah. I guess technically that would be a tight end that was in the line of scrimmage.
Yeah. So that was interesting. Just taking advantage of his quickness, good lateral agility for a dude that's that big. I thought he was a really big get. Where exactly he plays come game one, that's still up in the air with his versatility and the existing players. But I'd venture to say of the guys that came in, I'd pencil him in as the most guarantee for being a starter.
So he feels like the most guarantee almost also because he's flexible, right? Like if he can't play tackle, he can certainly play guard, certainly play center. Apparently you can put him out at the edge in the goal line. I think what impressed me most about him though, like I know this sounds cliche for an offensive lineman, he like plays mean in the best way possible. Like I think personally being a defensive lineman on the other side of him has to be an awful day at the office. Like he really like gets after people.
Yeah, he's not quite like Peyton Dunn mean, but he plays through the whistle every time. So it's just like you got to deal with this annoying guy the whole game.
Yes, and annoying in a way that helps Houston, not like an annoying way that's going to get stupid 15-yarders all the time. I hadn't seen, I guess, every single game he played. He's played a lot of football at this point, but you also mentioned that he played most of his snaps at center. Obviously a very highly touted recruit in his own right came in Demetrius Pancake Hunter as a center. Do you think there's a world where they play together with one of them playing guard? I think the natural guard would be Agnello out of the two.
Yeah, I don't, and it's not. Pancake is only, or Demetrius, I think is what he decided to go by. But he can't do anything about his frame. He's only as big as God allowed him to be. So he's kind of isolated to only playing center. So if he was to continue to start, it would be at center. And yeah, there's certainly a world where he lines up next to Agnello. I don't think it's a guarantee that it's time to move Pancake on or anything. I'm not necessarily going that far, but I think with the questions you might have with like Jason Brooks and Matthew Wyckoff, just because Wyckoff missed some time this past season and Brooks hasn't played since 2023. Dealing with recovering from some injuries. Good players. Obviously, the Cougars are happy to have them, but you got to see those guys play and see how their bodies react and how well they're doing with recovery. As far as I know, Wyckoff's healthy, but I just know he didn't play like a full season this past season.
Well, and I think actually in talking to Cody Stovall, host Locked On Oklahoma State, it kind of sounds like similar stuff was going on with Jason Brooks. And I kind of, frankly, as a fan, I'm excited that they have 4 guys that I know can start Big 12 games to play 3 spots, right? Like that's a good problem to have. Having to figure out which one goes where is a good thing, I think, by every statistical measure.
Yes.
And I feel confident that some combination of those guys will start and be successful in the Big 12. Obviously, successful, I guess, is a relative term, but we're doing better than we were a year ago, I think, in that front. We hadn't talked about Dalton Merryman, and I in scanning through before we got on what you wrote with Go Coogs, I think we both think he's a starter, particularly a starter at left tackle, which is very, very important. 6'9", crazy long arms. I didn't find his wingspan anywhere, but I would guess it's positive in that it's longer than his height is, right? I feel like it's interesting because I think he's a consensus immediate starter left tackle. And he's got his own flaws, right? He's at 6'9", 305 is kind of light for a left tackle. You can bull rush the guy. Were there other flaws, or is that the biggest thing you saw going on in his game?
Yeah, I mean, the 6'9" thing, it just comes with its natural benefits and deficiencies or issues with, however you want to phrase it. He's going to be long. He's going to be able to keep defenders upfield at the rush, at the point of attack. But let's say he plays, some rocked up 6'1", 250-pound DN. He's going to have naturally a lower center of gravity. He's going to be built lower to the ground. So Dalton's going to have to bend over a little more to get to him. And so it would make bending and driving him off the ball and stuff a little tougher, but not so much so that you're like, well, I don't know if we can play this guy. Of course, I think he's still going to be your starter. And he's only carrying 305 according to what he listed at. So I didn't think he was a poor run blocker, but there might be situations where he's just going to play bigger, heavier guys.
Well, and obviously, I don't actually know. I should ask probably in pre-pod if you'd done much research on Ebaseli, because he committed after you'd written the deal on the offensive line. But again, I feel like you've got between those two and Ndukwe 3 guys to play 2 spots. Also a good problem to have. So I think it's interesting they've constructed where like their interior guys are like, classic like steamroller road grader type run guys. That seems to be what those guys are better at. And then their tackles are more pass blocking, deep pass sets kind of guys, big long arms. Am I weird to think that there's a potential, like, even if it's just 15% concern about that not lining up, like those don't seem to match, I guess, on paper?
Sure. Yeah. I think on paper there's fair reason to question it or be concerned. But when I watched them, I thought Wyckoff was the only guy that stood out in terms of like play style. I thought he was more of, like you said, like a road grader, would lean on guys, with his weight and try to drive him off the ball. Where basically all the other guys that I watched, I felt like were very athletic, moved well enough laterally, like they could get out in space. So, like, I think with Merryman and Ndukwe are your guys, and whether it's Agnello or Hunter or Brooks, like those guys can get out in front of a screen, I think. And I think Wyckoff can do it too. No, I think it still allows you to do some of the stuff that we would like to see with the pass catchers that came in and existing, like Boogie, great in space. I think it still gives you the opportunity to do some some stuff and not like pigeonhole you to who was actually playing in the game at the time.
Well, and so anyway, I want to talk about a bunch of different stuff. I got more offensive guys later. We've only talked about one side of the trenches, and it's interesting that they almost feel set there and don't feel set on the other side. But before we get to that, I do want to talk to you guys a little bit about our newest buddies over at TNT, because it is that time of year. The college football playoff is back, and the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoffs begin December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. Leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch college football playoffs presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max.